For the Waynesboro City Council meeting for October 24th, 2022. Man, this year has flown by, hasn't it? Mr. Allen, lead us in the pledge, please.
Yes, sir. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, not a big crowd, not a big group, not a crowd. Not a big group here tonight, but it's a group nonetheless. Thank you all for coming out and being part of Waynesboro City Council. For those in attendance tonight, if you wish to speak at our public hearing, there's a sign-up, or not public hearing, our citizen comment period. There's a sign-up sheet in the back. We don't have a public hearing tonight, so it should be a pretty quick meeting as we go through this. Item 3. Has everyone had an opportunity to read and review our meeting agenda for tonight?
I have.
Is there a motion to approve our meeting agenda? Thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hosstetter. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, item 4 is matters for mayor, and I just got a couple of things tonight. The first is the Virginia School Board Association presented members of the Waynesboro School Board with certificates and pins for participating in the Virginia School Board Association Academy on Government and Services. And I was like, what in the world is this? So I had to get online and search this, and that's a pretty good academy. They do some really good stuff to learn about city government, budgeting, and that sort of thing. But we've got some school board members I'd like to congratulate on completing that course. The mission of this association is a voluntary, non-partisan organization of Virginia school boards, and it promotes excellence in public education through leadership, advocacy, and services. And going through their website, I think they do just that by the way the curriculum looked on their website. So Deborah Freeman Bell and Rick Wheeler both got a certificate of recognition. A award of excellence, which I can only assume is a very good award, went to Erica Smith. And then we have 2 awards of distinction that were 3 awards of distinction that were presented to Miss Diane Williams, Miss Kathy Manaville, and Dr. Jeffrey Castle. So I want to say thank you and congratulations to our school board members for taking the extra step, getting some leadership credits, and for receiving these awards. Council members have anything that they want to talk about?
Yes. Mayor Henderson and I attended the grand opening for a new unique business in Waynesboro, the Commonwealth Crush Company. They held a grand opening at the Virginia Metal Crafters Building, and I would just like to thank them for choosing Waynesboro.
Yeah, and if you didn't get, Mr. Allen was with us that day.
Oh, and Mr.
And Mr. Allen was with us that day. And it's kind of a unique place because growers grow their own grapes. They bring them to Waynesboro, ship them to Waynesboro. This producer crushes the grapes, turns the grapes into wine, then bottles the wine for market. And I was shocked talking to some of the people at the event that are actually sending their grapes in now and having wine produced as we speak. I thought it was going to be a while before they were up. They're running full speed ahead, and folks as far away as Richmond and Henrico County are sending their product in now to be turned into wine. So that was a good event.
I apologize, Bruce.
Anything else from you? All right. Well, I've got my COVID update. My face is still open, so that's a good sign. We are still green on the CDC map, and the good news is there's not a red county in Virginia on the latest iteration. There are a few yellow counties more towards the southwest Virginia, but again, the rest of the state has moved to green, so that's great news. Let's keep it that way. Here in Waynesboro, our numbers continue to be low. 1 or 2 cases documented a day. As I've shared before, those are the cases that report to the public health department. Folks doing it at home, those cases don't show up. So we still are seeing COVID. We're still hearing from patients that are testing positive at home for COVID. So it's not gone, but certainly our numbers are low right now, and that's a great thing. The second thing that I will throw out there This will be our last meeting before the upcoming election. And just a reminder to folks that early voting is already taking place, and November the 8th will be Election Day. And so I encourage people to get out and exercise their right to vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Hosstetter.
Yeah, just have one item. Last week attended, represented the city on the Go Virginia Region 8 Board of Directors, and pleased to share that we were able to facilitate and approve the last leg of the improvements at Shenandoah Valley Regional Airport to the tune of $1 million of state funds. That will finish up the utility work and allow them to move forward with their hangar expansion that they've been working so diligently towards. We're expecting that to generate the summation of all of those investments to yield over 200 jobs, averaging $100,000 apiece. So something I think that we should all be proud of, and more specifically, the opportunity that it really does present for other economic development enhancements, while be it in the county. What's good for the county, what's good for the region is good for Waynesboro. So just congratulations to the Shenandoah Valley Regional Airport.
And just to piggyback off that, they've got a new carrier coming in that's an American affiliate.
Right.
Which makes me very happy. I travel a lot. Now I can just drive 10 miles up the road and I'm at my airport rather than going all the way to Charlottesville. So support the airport.
Yeah, that starts November 1st, as a matter of fact.
Yes, it does. I've been keeping up with it.
Yep.
All right. Anything, was there anything on the museum this week, Terry? I know you keep up with that better than I do.
I attended they had an open house at the library.
Okay.
That's right.
And Tom, can't think of his name, Dr. Tom
Benzing?
Benzing.
Dr. Benzing, yeah.
Was there and was able to just talk with members of the public about some of the drawings. Again, as we've shared before, they've gone out to an architect now, and so things may be redone now that they've got a final firm that's going to be the one that's carrying it through. Folks, brought up questions about parking, and that's something I think that as a council and as a city we have to address as we talk about eliminating some of the spots out here at Constitution Park. What we're going to do for large events and how that's going to look. But I think, again, that is surmountable. Also talked about the question of flooding, and they're going to be reviewing that and making sure that, of course, the facility will be safe and protected from flooding. So it was interesting to see the pictures, and they are, I think, online at the website. So.
Thank you, Dr. Hosstetter. All right, that brings us to item number 6, and that's consider the consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review what we sent to the consent agenda from last month? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll
So
make
moved.
that motion.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Ms. Williams and Dr. Hosstetter. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. And then item number 7 is to receive a presentation on employee compensation and retention and consider introducing an ordinance appropriating sales, meals, and personal property tax to the general fund for operating expenses. Mr. Ham.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you. Know that we've been responding to, can you move this one? Responding to sort of a commonly recognized need that we have some acute situations with employee vacancies and retention. On top of that, about 3 years ago, we completed a pay and classification study that we were poised to implement or initially implement when COVID hit. And so we had measures in the FY20 budget, FY21 budgets that we were not able to realize as we contended with the coronavirus. So this evening, we're in a position, having identified some available resource in the current budget. We've made some recommendations to bring to council to accelerate implementation of the pay plan and address in a more aggressive manner compensation in the organization more generally. So this evening, I'll speak briefly about what's in the current budget. We'll talk about a very general review of the pay study. Actually, Mr. Devin Cockrell will furnish that. It's been some time probably since we've seen any of that information or the concepts there collectively together. And then we'll present to council some recommended adjustments. Of equal importance is the plan for funding those adjustments, and then we'll afford an opportunity for the council to ask questions or discuss what you hear tonight. Ultimately, our goal is for the council to introduce and discuss an ordinance that would be on your agenda for final consideration on November 14th. So, to be clear, we've had a number of ongoing conversations about compensation and the budget, and I want to make sure that the council understands and that the public understands and that those employees in the organization understand that there is provided for in the 2023 budget a 3% adjustment and phase one of the compensation study. As dust began to settle on budgets in the area, it became fairly apparent that the 3% in phase one of the comp study was not going to move us to a more competitive position among the regional, other local governments, in the region. And that I, as a manager, felt like that there was a need to perhaps act before the next budget process. And I shared those feelings with members of council, and I think across the board, there was consensus that the council would be open to hearing about solutions that might be available before the next budget. The next step is, but I want to be clear that no misconceptions. Funded in the current budget, if the council decided that they weren't going to take any action, that there's provided a 3% raise in the first phase of the compensation study. Devin's going to speak more in depth, but as an initial reminder, phase one of the compensation study brings employees to the minimum identified market rate for their position. So Devin, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. So just wanted to provide a quick recap of where we came from with the original comp study and how this opportunity will provide us to make further strides than we anticipated in hopes of getting more competitive in our overall compensation plan. So in 2018, 2019, we had a compensation study process, and in that there were 4 phases to the implementation of that study. We found that those phases were still applicable to our current situation. We made a few tweaks, we'll adjust in the next slide as far as what that actually means, but the phases included adoption of the actual compensation plan, which is essentially moving everyone into the new scales. So obviously identifying that there may be some folks that fall out of the scales, and so there has to be an adjustment to get them compliant and into the new scale system. Phase 2 identifies those that, based on what the market rate says they should be, fall greater than 10% away from that market rate. So, if somebody was 12% away from whatever their market is, that would be a person that would be identified in phase 2 to move them to at least 10% closer to that mark. Phase 3, move them to 5%, so inch even closer, more aggressive. And then finally, the last phase was to get everyone to that magical market rate that we identified. And so the overall changes that come with adopting the study is that we migrated from a 40 pay scale system to a 20 pay scale system. The highlights of why that move was necessary is that there was a lot of redundancy in which we applied the pay grades. Not everyone fell in a particular pay grade, and there was just an abundance that didn't seem necessary. There was also not enough of a percentage gap between each scale, so there was a lot of compression that ended up as a result of that. So by moving to 20 grades, it allowed us to expand the range to a greater percentage per position, and then also create more separation between grades to avoid compression. And then also adopting the study would evaluate everyone based on those new scales and identify both the market rate and where they need to be plotted upon adoption of that new scale. The other change that we've adopted, or you all have adopted, is changing the anchor point to which the scales start from 1186, which was proposed in 2019. Obviously, the landscape changes, and we're even at a point now where minimum wage is going to be $12. So 1186 just wasn't going to cut it. So we identified that 13 would be a good anchor point for us and what we could afford to accomplish, and that's what we decided to move forward with regards to the new system. And I'll pass it back to you.
So a couple of pieces that may be helpful to keep in mind. Again, it's been some time since we've reviewed the study information. We've sent out our survey to some 61 local governments and public authorities, and we had 27 responses, which is a fairly good response rate. Our market goal, you'll hear us talk about market pay. Our market goal is 50% of the surveyed market. So essentially, half of those organizations that we surveyed will pay better than us, and half will pay not as well as us. So we're right in the middle of the bell curve, and we felt like that was appropriate given a number of factors, but one of them being affordability. And our sense of, sort of what the culture and economic, political philosophy of the area was, that the middle of the bell curve seemed about right. Go ahead, thanks.
So as Mr. Hant mentioned, as the dust started to settle on the budget, we started to realize that we had probably fallen short in a couple areas on compensation. So as meals tax started to come in for the current year, as sales tax started to come in for the current year, and as the personal property rate became more solidified during the current year, we kind of developed a list of priorities. The other thing that factored into this was we were able to procure our health insurance this year, which also provided some savings. And we'll line all that up on a funding slide towards the end. But we saw a couple of opportunities to either shift some dollars around or appropriate some dollars to inject directly into compensation. So as we prioritized, we got pretty quickly to add 2% to the 3% adjustment to try and match the localities around us. And then implementation of phase 2, we found a lot of utility still in the compensation study as we were working on it during the budget process. But we did recognize that only implementing phase 1 would create some compression. So the next step was, let's see if we can correct some of that compression created in phase 1 for all non-public safety, and that should also say public works employees. And then as we were working through kind of our acute pinch points, we found that most of our vacancies were in police departments, 911, and in public works. And so we said, let's do a direct injection into those departments. So for public safety, we went out and resurveyed 6 or 7 direct market competitors based on which function of public safety, so public safety being EOC, emergency operations, police and fire. So we surveyed Augusta County, Stanton, Rockingham, Albemarle, and Harrisonburg for EOC, police, and fire. And then for police, we also surveyed the Virginia State Police with a goal of moving the public safety salaries to the middle of the local market. And what we found when we got those surveys back, if you recall, in the end of 2020, November, December of 2020, we did some specific adjustments for police. Beginning of this past year, 2022, we did some specific adjustments for police, fire, and EOC. In all of those 3 areas, we had fallen back to either 6th or 7th again in the region of the people that we had surveyed. So with a goal to try and get into the middle of the market on those, recommended adjustment for emergency operations would be to move the starting pay for telecommunicators from $35,200 to $38,500 per year. That would get us to 3rd out of the 6 competitors surveyed. When we say address compression, you'll see that on the next few slides. Basically what that means, the last 2 times that we've done this, we've tried to give comparable raises to the base adjustment to the people above as to not create compression at the bottom of the range. The other thing that we started to notice for the police and the fire, who we had done raises for previously, we were starting to have a lot of folks stack on the bottom of that range. So we felt it important to maintain the 5% raise opportunity if the person was employed here with the city as of September 26th. And that September 26th date, that'll hold for the general across the board raise as well. If you were employed as of September 26th and you're funded by the city, you would be included in the raise opportunity. Recommended police adjustment, same concept, except for moving them from 44 to 47. That'll get them to third out of, the department to third out of seventh in terms of starting wages. The goal again would be, again, to address compression with the current employees based on the bottom scale adjustment, and then also maintain the 5% to avoid compression at the bottom of the range once we make the adjustment. Firefighters, the same thought process on the bottom two bullets. The main difference is trying to get the starting pay of firefighters from $36,149 to $42,000 a year. Continue to try and address compression with adjustments for the lieutenants and captains above them, and then also maintain the 5% raise opportunity for that department as well. With Public Works, we took a little bit different tactics. So the minimum pay on Public Works for the collectors and the utility ones, based on the compensation study itself in phase one, would have moved it to $13 an hour. One of the suggestions that we got from the Public Works Director was, can we provide adjustments for our frontline employees, the people that you see that are working on crews and the supervisors of the crews. So we would recommend, and that would take the starting pay for utility one from $12.60 to $13.62. It would take the starting pay for collectors from $11.10 to $13.62. Again, a 5% adjustment to the frontline operations employees that are above them. And then also continue that same thought process of maintaining that 5% raise opportunity if you're employed with the city as of September 26th. So that way, hopefully, we're not hiring in employees right on top of our employees that have been here for a year or two. That would provide an average increase for those frontline employees of about 15%. Also in Public Works, two areas of need to try and create some redundancy that we've identified. We have some positions that our CDL is required for. They've made the request to set aside a pot of money, $5,000 per fund for the general fund, water fund, sewer fund, refuse, and stormwater, to encourage employees to get their CDL, that it's not necessarily a requirement of their job. That helps them, that if they need to move somebody through a promotion, they can do that more easily, and it also helps us with redundancy. And then also an incentive at the wastewater plant and the water plant of $20,000 for licensure. So that's $10,000 per plant to encourage folks to get their licensure so that we can continue with value add and things like that on those funds. So any questions on the adjustments themselves, or if not, I can move on to how it's funded, or we can hold them till the end, whatever council would like.
I'm good till the end.
Okay, so the total adjustment, we'll kind of start at the bottom, is $2.14 million. The original raise that was appropriated in the phase one of the comp study, there was about $950,000 of funds there spread across all of the funds that we deal with employees in. The health insurance savings. So when we bid the health insurance out, we were able to realize about 10% savings on our health insurance. So across all of the funds, that's about a $400,000 in savings. The personal property tax, the rate of $262 that was adopted would provide about $430,000 of additional revenue. The sales and meals tax, they're both tracking about $125,000 ahead of schedule in the first few months of this year. So between the two, it's about $250,000 in revenue that I think you could safely appropriate. If you'll recall, during the 2023 budget process, we were setting aside money for a capital contribution at the Augusta County Service Authority, about $248,000 in total. That is in the refuse fund. We would recommend taking some of that $248 and transferring it to the compensation lines, to add about $60,000 to compensation to fund the refuse funds adjustments, and then holding one position in the sewer fund. Public Works Director feels like he's not going to be able to fill at least 2 or 3 of those positions during the current year. So take the money that's there with the vacancy, will be there for the year, reappropriate it into the fund, and then take a look at the rates in the refuse fund and the sewer fund. The other thing that's not on the slide, but may be necessary, the water fund was about $60,000 short. In the water fund, they pay the general fund for administrative costs every year. It's about $400,000 or $500,000 each year. I would recommend reducing that transfer by about $60,000 so that we can make the water fund whole, and the there's about $60,000 extra in the general fund appropriation, that the revenues in the general fund will still meet in their totality, and give the water fund a little bit of break on the administrative transfer. So for a total of $2.1 million.
So future considerations, Phase 3 and Phase 4 of the compensation study certainly will turn our attention, assuming that we attend to the first and second phases, we'll turn our next attention to Phase 3 and Phase 4 of the comp study, and try to continue momentum and enjoy the benefit. And those two will reduce compression and move the organization closer to that market point. Continued review and adjustment of the pay scale. One thing, a habit that we need to establish is an annual update of the pay scale. That one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we have fallen into such a deficient or uncompetitive position is that we've not consistently updated our pay scale. So we'll have to apply funds to that, and that will help preserve our market position improvement. We're going to renew some focus on team building and employee engagement activities, realizing that while compensation is essential and very important to most employees, it's not the only consideration. When you're talking about employee satisfaction, employee retention, employee loyalty, and commitment, I think we need to do a better job as an organization. I need to do a better job as a leader, furnishing activities of employee engagement, whether that's around things that you might do organizationally in terms of civic activity, training, social team building, just trying to elevate the measure of fun involved in our work and being part of this organization. We want to maintain our focus on career development. Most of our departments have the framework established for career development programs in which we increase employee compensation based on certain benchmarks in terms of either licensure or training, skill acquisition, other shift differentials, those types of things that don't affect base pay necessarily, but do recognize when individuals go the extra mile to acquire a skill or make themselves available during an inconvenient time, or just lend additional value to the organization and the mission. We want to continue to make progress with our take-home vehicle program and the PD. And then in some of the conversations, I hope all the conversations that we had preparing for tonight's meeting, we mentioned the opportunity for a SAFER grant related to the fire service. During this period of vacancy and attrition, one of the things that our employees and departments contend with is the fact that you have fewer employees, and that can create strain on productivity and work hours. That it's more difficult to get folks off when they prefer to be off, foregoing training opportunities. Folks are working longer hours, and one solution to that problem is to increase headcount. And we think there's an opportunity, especially in the fire department, through the SAFER grant, to increase headcount and thereby relieve some of the strain and stress on those individuals. And the SAFER grant provides an opportunity for, through grant proceeds, to hire additional headcount, and then over time to step down and assume full financial responsibility for those positions at a local level. And when we talked about that, I seemed to think that that was something that the council would be either interested in doing or interested in hearing more about. So that's something that we think is certainly helpful. So this evening, now is a good time for the council to ask questions or discuss concepts. And we would like, before we close tonight, for you to introduce second and discuss the ordinance if you're inclined to do so. And then in terms of assuming a positive track for this, we would look to implementation in the first pay period in December and the first pay period in January. And if possible, the staff is evaluating the opportunity or the ability to merge those into a single administrative undertaking. But that's sort of the timeline that we're on, and it's a fairly tight one, thinking about the fact that November 14th is our next meeting. And if we want to realize these benefits sooner rather than later, it's a pretty tight turnaround. We are happy to respond to questions that you have.
Anybody have questions? No, and in fairness, I get to talk to Mike during the week, and they keep me up to date on what's going on, so I'm pretty good on what he's got going here.
I actually do have a question, and for Karen or Mike, whoever's got the answer. Talking about the meals and lodging taxes coming in ahead of budget. Are we back up? Are we surpassing pre-COVID numbers? I mean, because obviously when we make a commitment to salary, we need to fund it next year as well. So what is it, where are we and what do we expect for the next year?
So we've surpassed 2019 and 2020 numbers. 2021 surpassed 2020 numbers. The only number that actually ended up taking a little bit of a dip during the pandemic was the meals tax. And at times it's hard to tell whether that was a real dip or whether it was because at the very onset of the pandemic, council passed I think it was an ordinance to not apply penalties and interest to meals tax for a few months. And so we saw a pop in meals tax in July, August timeframe as that ordinance lapsed. So it all got into the correct year, but the question was, did it really, those months, were they really down? So those are hard to tell, but on the whole, they are both up. The other thing that makes me even more comfortable, after the initial pop for basically a year, we've seen it kind of level off at the pace of inflation, which leads me to believe that we're not seeing these huge spikes in demand that will then ultimately fall off if the economy were to fall off some. So I think that you could safely appropriate that $250,000 in meals and sales.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody good?
Yeah, I would just want to take the time to, I did chat with Mike and Cameron and Todd last week while I was waiting for an oil change in Chicago, as a matter of fact. And so I just want to just acknowledge their, all of staff's hard work on piecing this together, and I'm supportive of it. But I do want to just sort of let our citizens be fully aware of that there are some inherent sort of observations here, right? When, one, we're doing a mid-year, the implementation of the phase one that we approved in July is a mid-year, so you're going to realize another 6 months in the next tax year. A vacancy savings of $50,000. We want to fill that position. It's a needed position. So that will come with inflation, and once that vacancy is filled, I think it was a $60,000 figure, which I'm from the Augusta County landfill, which is not a annual, biennial sort of a savings. At some point, that will also end. And then there was another figure in there. So long short of it, my fuzzy math is around $400,000 that would have to be available in the next fiscal year in order to do it. But I also think that we can't, and nor should we, balance our budget on the backs of our employees. And so I think it's imperative that we take leadership and address this issue that is, compounded and put us in a position that we have to act on behalf of our citizens and our employees. So with all that being said, just want to go, on record that we're going to have some tough conversations in July. And I'm prepared to do that. But I just want to just sort of acknowledge it and put that out there.
Thank you, Terry. All right. Do we have a motion to introduce an ordinance appropriating sales, meals, personal property tax to the general fund for operating expenses?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Allen. This motion's been first and seconded. It will be reconsidered at our November 14th meeting. Thank you all very much. And for staff, I want to personally thank you guys. You've worked very hard on this. You've done a great job. Cameron, you've burned some midnight hours. We appreciate the extra work. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, item number 8 is correspondence, communications, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Hamp.
Yes, sir. I have 2 items. First, a reminder that tomorrow is our snowplow rodeo. It's a fun exercise that the Public Works, I think it's fun. Maybe the guys and ladies that actually do it don't enjoy it, but it seems fun to me, where we'll do some skill training and they'll get prepared and oriented for the winter ahead of us. And we like to invite the council to come down and observe and offer some encouragement if you care to do so, if your schedule allows, and that'll be from 8 to 12, with a rain date makeup on Wednesday. Also, a reminder that we need some guidance on the Planning Commission vacancy, that we've, if the council can consider that and furnish some guidance about how you want to proceed with that, the staff will support and hopefully prepare for November 14th appointment. And that's all I have this evening.
Okay. All right, then, next item is our citizen comment period. Do we have anyone?
No one has signed up to speak, sir.
No one wants to talk tonight. Lonely night in council. All right, well then, this is Mr. Allen's favorite part of the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Williams, thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all very much.